Police shootings. We've had a shooting here in the greater Birmingham metro here recently, and just by nature of my position and kind of what I do for a living and my educational background, I've been getting tons of questions. What do you think about the shooting in the Galleria Mall in Hoover? And I tell everybody the same thing. I don't know. I wasn't there. And anybody that says they do know what happened is full of it, even if they were there. And that's the thing that people don't realize. You know, when I look at the comments on social media regarding the shooting and most shootings with law enforcement where there's ever a question about whether the right thing happened or the wrong thing happened, which seems to be every single shooting now with law enforcement. You know, the comments, oh, my friend was there, or his girlfriend was there, and it's always 3 degrees of separation. And the first layer of this witness testimony gets put out there, and then everybody just parrots it ad nauseum for the entire duration of the news cycle of the whatever given shooting we're talking about. And first off, let me say this before I get any deeper in this. Sometimes the cop is wrong. Sometimes he or she isn't. Okay? Everybody's fallible. Every human is fallible. Doctors make mistakes. Police officers make mistakes. Firefighters make mistakes. The military makes mistakes. The guy that picks up your garbage at the end of your driveway makes mistakes. But obviously the stakes are higher in some of these positions. And if you are holding a position where the stakes are higher, then there's more responsibility on your shoulders. That comes with the territory. I can't stand when people approach these situations from either angle, from either side of the argument, already knowing in their mind, knowing the truth and having their mind made up and that there's no changing it. And too many people, and across all political debates nowadays, approach situations. I'm not talking about principles. You can be principled and have a belief and be hard and fast to that belief, but approach situations and transpose their principles on top of it and assume that the narrative in their mind across the entire spectrum of their principles must apply 100% in this specific situation. That's lunacy, okay? And it undermines your credibility. So if you do that, stop, okay? People that approach these law enforcement shootings knowing that the cop was right every single time, you weren't in his shoes, you don't know what he's having to deal with, and blah, 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 and no matter what happened, the cop can't possibly be wrong, your arguments are completely invalid. As are the people that approach it that every time the cop must be some power-mad, racist, blah, 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 blah. Your argument's invalid. You're entitled to your opinion, but it is absolutely worthless in the public narrative because you don't have the objectivity to approach a situation with specific and unique actors and circumstances and understand that it is its own thing. Everybody could be wrong. Nobody could be wrong. There is nuance and gray area, and that's really what I want to talk about here. First off, the general public is absolutely ignorant as it applies to deadly force by an officer because they don't even understand how it's legally or ethically justified. So let's just set aside ethics now, and let's talk about the law. I'm going to read a couple of things from Graham versus Connor, 1989. This is one of the main Supreme Court case precedents that governs how deadly force by an officer is viewed in the eyes of the law in terms of saying that it was a good shoot or a bad shoot. I'm going to read a couple of important points from Graham versus Connor, 1989. If you've never heard that phrase, you are entitled to your opinion on law enforcement shootings. 100% entitled to it. And I support your right to have it and have it in the public forum. Understand it's not informed. I'm trying to inform you now. Okay. Held. Graham versus Connor, 1989. Look it up. Held. All claims that law enforcement officials have used excessive force, deadly or not, in the course of an arrest, investigatory stop, or other seizure of a free citizen are properly analyzed under, this is where it gets important, the Fourth Amendment's objective reasonableness standard, rather than under a substantive due process standard. Okay, so let's extrapolate what that means. Objective reasonableness is the key phrase there. Okay. The Fourth Amendment reasonableness inquiry is whether the officer's actions are objectively reasonable in light of the facts and circumstances confronting them, without regard to their underlying intent or motivation. Incredibly important phrase there. Without regard to their underlying intent or motivation. The reasonableness of a particular use of force must be judged from the perspective of a reasonable officer on the scene, and its calculus must embody an allowance for the fact that police officers are often forced to make split-second decisions about the amount of force necessary in a particular situation. Okay, let me unpack that, take a little bit out of lawyerese, and put it into plain English, even though that was fairly plain. For use of a force by an officer to be okay under the case precedent of Graham versus Connor 1989, his or her actions had to be objectively reasonable from the perspective of a law enforcement officer, not you at your couch with no training, no understanding of human factors and use of force, reaction times, or the like. A trained officer on the scene, their action must have been objectively reasonable in the moment they made the decision to inflict or impose force with the information immediately at their disposal. Hindsight's 20/20, but the officer doesn't have the benefit of hindsight in the moment. Example. Let's say I'm a law enforcement officer and I get called to the scene. Somebody's waving a gun around. I show up on the scene. There's a perpetrator matching the description of the call that I just got dispatched to, and he's got a gun in his hand. And of course, this is a felony stop, of a potentially violent encounter. I'm getting out of my squad car with my gun at the low ready. I see the individual, gun comes up to the high ready. I'm just underneath his feet. Drop the weapon, drop it now. And he points it at me. An objectively reasonable response in that situation would be to shoot that guy till he's not pointing a gun at me anymore. Bang, 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 bang. 5 shots to the torso. He drops the weapon. He falls on the ground. He flops around a little while, and he takes a room temperature challenge. Everybody responds to the scene, finds out the gun in his hand is an airsoft gun with the little orange tip broken off. Was it practically necessary for me to shoot that guy? No. He had a fake gun that could not inflict any real harm to me. It wasn't practically necessary for me to shoot that guy. But hindsight's 20/20. I know that now that he's laying there at 73 degrees on the sidewalk, that I didn't have to shoot that guy. What about tactically? Was it tactically necessary for me to shoot that guy? If I want to go home and kiss my wife and hold my kids, yes. Because it was objectively reasonable in the moment that I pulled the trigger to assume that that gun was real. What's the risk to me if I assume it's fake? If every time I arrive on the scene, I assume that's probably not a real gun. It's probably an airsoft gun with the orange tip broken off. Or why don't I wait till he pulls the trigger just once and see if it makes a loud bang sound or a psst sound like an airsoft gun? Or I don't even know if he's going to pull the trigger. Why don't I wait for him to shoot? It gets pretty obvious pretty quickly what objectively reasonable means. Let's go back to another phrase here. Without regard to the underlying intent or motivation. Here's a news flash, people. Sometimes the cop's not wrong and the person they shoot's not a bad guy. I know that might blow some of your minds, but let's go back to the situation where everybody's talking about here in Hoover. Now, I have no idea what happened. I wasn't there. And if you were there, you were probably so concerned with getting away from the sound of gunshots and sympathetic stress that your tunnel vision, audio exclusion, vasoconstriction's kicking in, and you aren't cognizant at a level of what's going on around you to regurgitate anything valuable if you were close enough to the situation to see the kind of detail that would be necessary and making an informed decision, assuming you were even educated on what informed means. Let's say that there's a shooting. Now, I don't know what happened in Hoover, so don't extrapolate this as me telling you what went down in Hoover. I don't know, but I'm just saying this is a possible scenario. So I'm using this as a parable loosely based on what might have happened in Hoover at the Galleria. There's a scuffle in the mall. Somebody pulls a gun out and starts shooting. Shoots a couple of people. Everybody runs in opposite directions. Law enforcement's already on the scene a little ways away. They hear gunshots. They do what cops do. They run towards the gunfire that everybody else is running away from. As the guy comes around the corner, guy being law enforcement officer, here comes a person with a gun in their hand and plain clothes. Now, the cop doesn't know if he's an innocent bystander who pulled their weapon out to protect themselves. He doesn't know if he was the shooter, the active shooter himself. He doesn't know if he's an off-duty cop. He just knows it's a dude in plain clothes with a gun in his hand. Cop does what he's trained to do. He's already got his gun in his hand. He presents the weapon. This is an active shooter situation in a crowded mall. Drop the gun! Drop the gun! The guy's gun begins to move towards the law enforcement officer. Bang, 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 room temperature challenge. So let's evaluate this, not from the cop's perspective, though, from that guy that just got shot's perspective. Him and his buddies are at the mall. Some punks pick a fight with him. He's a grown man. He's not going to stand for that. They start shoving. He's going to stand his ground. And somebody pulls a gun out and starts shooting. He's thinking, whoa, this got way too deep. I'm not trying to kill nobody. I'm not trying to get shot. And he runs away, but he don't know if these guys are following him. He's got a concealed carry permit. He pulls his gun out. Not the best tactical decision to make, but an untrained person with regard to defensive tactics in a home base environment grabs his gun and runs away just in case the guy's chasing him down and he has to defend himself, I guess. Not the best tactical decision. Bad judgment, but good initiative, right? His heart's in the right place. And he's running away with his gun in his hand in case he has to use it. And he comes around the corner and shots are firing. People are screaming. People going everywhere. It's a crowded mall. It's like sympathetic stress kicked in. Audio exclusion. The volume gets turned down. Tunnel vision. He's running through a fog. I mean, he's like he's running through a crowded mall looking through a telescope. And he's got his gun in his hand. And he's running, and people are screaming. And here comes people running to the scene with guns in their hands. And they're shouting at him, run, drive a gun. And it's information overload. And he's trying to get out. I'm not the shooter. I'm not the shooter. And he's getting it out. This is not a real gun. This is an airsoft gun. He's trying. I'm not the. This is what he's trying to say. It's not me. It's not me. He's running. It's not me. This guy's not the bad guy. This guy hasn't done anything legally wrong. He's made some bad tactical decisions. He's running away from the scene of a shooting with a gun in his hand and plain clothes. He's scared. Scared people don't make good decisions. I don't care what this guy's background is. Law enforcement, military, security, trained, untrained. He's made bad decisions and he's scared. But he's not a bad guy. He's not a criminal, but he's made some tactical decisions that were probably not the best. I'm not the bad guy. I'm not the bad guy. Now let's flip roles. Cop, crowded mall, running traffic, bored out of his mind, chatting it up with the other cops. Then, boom, 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 boom. There's that vapor lock moment. Like, is this really happening? Are those really gunshots? Oh my gosh, my mall, my shift, my day, active shooter situation. Oh my God. And they tear off towards the scene, drawing their weapons, getting in ready to go, trying to keep their fingers straight off the trigger. I mean, it's the holiday season. All the flashes of ideas going through their mind. Is this really happening? I'm running through. Get out of the way. Get out. Get out. And here comes a dude running around the corner with a gun in his hand. And this is what, you're the cop. This is what he sees. And you're the cop, and you go, drop the gun, drop the gun. And the guy goes, what's objectively reasonable? If you go from the low ready to the isosceles and lay rounds down range, and you shoot a guy that any trained cop that wants to see his family tonight is gonna shoot, and you're not wrong for doing it. Did you just shoot a bad guy? No. Are you a criminal? No. Because hindsight is 20/20, but you don't have it at your disposal. It was objectively reasonable in the moment as a trained officer to impose deadly force with your weapon against a guy at the tail end of an active shooter situation who has just pointed a gun at you. Is this a human tragedy? Yes, it's an absolute tragedy. That cop's going to live the rest of his life thinking, I wonder if I killed a guy that I didn't have to. In spite of his training, in spite of Graham versus Connor, he's going to question his actions for the rest of his life. And then that guy's family doesn't have him anymore. And they're trying to wrestle with the idea that the cops killed their kid, killed their brother, killed their nephew, cousin, uncle, dad, husband, boyfriend, whatever. Mind-blowing moment here. In the nuance of Graham versus Connor, maybe the guy that got shot wasn't a criminal. That doesn't automatically make the cop one. Look, politics are polarizing everybody. It's getting dangerous out there, how polarized everything is. If you're going to put everything on the line for an argument, make sure you know what you're talking about. If you're going to fight to the death, figuratively or literally, over a debate about actions, make it be about the actual actions, not about a narrative that existed before the situation ever even happened. I also suggest you go up to Google and type in Graham versus Connor 1989 and read the whole thing and see if you can be one of the enlightened few that walks into these kinds of situations with a modicum of objectivity. Appreciate you watching.